Today we're going to get into the crazy, make no sense death of 12-year-old Sean Daugherty. On April 14th, Sean's sister Maria got home around 4:50 to a locked door, and to Sean not answering the phone or the door for her to come inside. So when she called her mother to let her know that Sean wasn't answering, her mother suggested that she go over the back fence and try to go through the back door, just figuring that Sean was playing a video game and had the TV up too loud and just couldn't hear her knocking or hear the phone. But when Maria went into the backyard, she saw Sean hanging dead on their backyard swing set. And the timeline leading up to this situation is not a very long one. He arrived home from school shortly after 3 o'clock and was last spoken to by his mother at 3:30. So this is an hour and 20-minute window to where something crazy happened. Help me make sense of this, guys, because law enforcement's deeming this a suicide, and I'm really on the fence about it. Sean got home from school around 3 o'clock, maybe a few minutes later. His mother pulls in to pick up the grandma. The grandmother received a phone call from her doctor stating that she needed to have an EKG done, and it was already scheduled prior to her getting the call, I guess, because she got the call and then was immediately getting picked up to go to the EKG appointment. The appointment itself was only supposed to be about 25 minutes, but then you also have to factor in driving there, waiting room, driving back, right? Jared, who is Sean's stepfather, was already at another appointment about 40 minutes away for Sean's little brother, who's autistic. It was an autistic appointment that was going to last about 2 hours. So this is important because Sean being home alone, much less home alone watching his 2-year-old brother for a little while, was last minute. So again, him being home alone, not a planned event. Mom and Grandma leave a few minutes after 3. I messaged the private investigation team that is working the Facebook page, which I'm going to leave a link to the Facebook page and the petition that we're going to talk about later on change.org. I'm going to leave links to both of those in the description. I spoke to him because I heard several times that Sean submitted his homework, so I wanted a timestamp. He told me she, I'm not sure, like a real private investigator does, they keep their identity like it's supposed to be because you're a private investigator. So I like the fact that this person is not giving a name of who they are or anything. It's just labeled generic. I actually appreciate that very much, and I am totally fine talking to this generic person who is in charge of this page, because I know that this page is handled by the family and by the private investigator that the family has told us that they hired. So that being said, I asked about homework, and I was told that the timestamp for the homework being submitted was at 3:09 p.m. In a podcast, the mother mentions Sean having a chore app. I asked the person on the page about this, and the trash can needing to be changed chore notification was set for 3:30. Now, what was found in the home, because this is the stuff that makes law enforcement's assumption of self-oofing make no sense to me. Well, this on top of a few other things we're going to talk about. There was a peach in a bowl on the counter, like Sean was making himself something to snack on. You don't make yourself a snack if you're going to go self-oof. You're not worried about being hungry if you're about to self-oof. So there's that. There was 2 trash bags that had been taken out of the trash drawer, tied up on the floor, and Sean's Crocs, which I'm going to assume he was going to slip on to go take the trash outside, were on the floor upside down in front of the trash bags. Something else that was found were trash bags that did not belong to the family. They were residential trash bags, according to the PI, and they were blue tie string. The family always buys their trash bags from Costco, apparently. And they all have red tie strings. The mom even went through the house to like verify all the trash bags, and all the boxes of trash bags had red ties. So here we have these two foreign ripped up trash bags in their house, and they have no idea how they got there. Not just that, Maria's boyfriend's mother, I believe, was helping straighten up in the kitchen, and she's the one who noticed a palm print of a left hand on the high top part of the window pane leading out to the backyard, which you can see right here in this little kitchenette photo. The fingerprints, the palm print, was very noticeable apparently because there was like some sort of residue on it that was like magnifying it. And come to find out, LE never lifted it until it was brought to their attention by the family. And according to the family, they've been given like two different stories when it comes to this handprint. So when they were first talking to LE about it, LE told them that it was a good lift, a good print, but that it didn't match absolutely anything in any system. I'm going to assume that would mean they also tried to match it against Sean's handprint. At least I would hope so, okay? They're not stating that it's Sean's, and they're stating there's no matches anywhere, okay? So when the family questioned them about it again, then law enforcement told them it was no good, not good enough to work with. Well, which one was it? Now, mind you, he is babysitting his 2-year-old little brother. And it said that he was taking a nap on the couch whenever the mom and grandma left for this appointment. Now, another thing that I asked the person on the page is, where was the couch and the toddler sleeping in comparison to where like the trash bags in the kitchen area was? And he informed me that the house had been for sale, which I had known that before, and that there was photos online of the house. So I went and I grabbed them. I grabbed them from Zillow, and it is a listing that the family had done prior to what happened to Sean, because this is a military family. And they had actually just gotten news that they were going to be moving to the Pentagon. The Pentagon. And Sean was apparently super excited about this. So the photos on Zillow for the house listing are pretty heartbreaking because it's the family's decorations. You can see Maria's name hanging on the wall in her room. You can see the bunk beds in which Sean used to sleep on the top bunk. You can see the garage where the motorcycle helmet bags were taken from that were found on his head when his body was found. And you can see the swing set before. And it is sort of like an open area floor plan. You walk in the front door, there's steps off to the side, and then you go down like a foyer hallway, and it's like the living room area, but there's no ceiling. The ceiling is up to the second story, so it's massively open, and then you see the counter and it leads into the kitchen area. Now there's like a little breakfast area with a table off to this side, and then the kitchen is off to this side where I'm going to assume the trash drawer was. And then there's like a door right here on the end of the kitchen that is most likely the door that would lead into the garage. I feel like the layout of the house and the timing of whenever the situation most likely occurred is very important, which is why I wanted to include the visuals. Let's get back to Maria getting home and going into the backyard and seeing Sean hanging from the swing set. Now, according to her, she runs over when she finally realizes that it's Sean, because at first she wasn't really sure what she was looking at. She thought it could have been a stranger. She goes over and she is simultaneously lifting him up with one arm while she's calling 911. Now, Maria is 6 feet tall, according to the PI. Her and Ramona, the mom, are both 6 feet. Ramona might be 6'1", but they're tall. Sean was 5'10" at just 12 years old. So she's simultaneously lifting him up and calling 911 at the exact same time. Now, it's said that Maria took 3 fingers and removed the string-like rope from around Sean's head area. Now, she stated it was around his chin, that it was holding him up by his chin on the swing set, not his neck. When she sees him, the first thing she notices is that there is a belt secured around his waist area, but his arms are inside the belt. So this belt is strapped extremely tightly to his body, securing both of his arms down by his side. And it is also stated that the EMTs, once they got on the scene, make comments about how tight the belt is around Sean, because it took them a minute to be able to finally get it loose. Maria performed CPR for about 6 minutes while on the phone with law enforcement and waiting for everyone to show up. Now, from what it sounds like, Ramona and her mother were on their way back from the doctor's appointment, and they got stopped at a red light. And at this red light, EMTs, ambulances, police cars were all rushing past them. And she said she knew then something was wrong. She drove up to her house with all of the people that had just passed her on the road parked in front of her yard. It actually isn't until sometime later, when she is able to walk into the room where Sean's body is being held on the bed, that she notices that he's wearing his stepfather's shirt. This entire thing starts going pretty wild from that point. It was already super intense and crazy, but then once you hear the rest of the story, things are absolutely Twilight Zone. At this point, Mom also notices that Sean is wearing his stepfather's underwear. And it would turn out his body was hung there on the swing, completely covered in his stepfather's clothes. A shirt, a pair of denim pants, his underwear, and a black belt. Now, the crazy thing about that is that according to what the parents have said and what the PI on the page told me, the clothes, the pants, and the belt have never been shown to Mom and Dad. Because I specifically asked if Jared, the stepfather, could identify any specific pieces of clothing that were actually missing, okay? You know if you have a shirt missing that you don't see for a while, or you know what kind of belts you have, right? And he didn't state whether he recognized any specific missing pieces, but it's basically just being assumed that this was actually the stepfather's clothes. And the main reason for that is because Sean's underwear were later found in the walkway in the master bedroom that leads to the bathroom for the master bedroom. And not just the underwear being on the floor, but the Chester drawer that had clothes in it for Jared, the stepdad, the drawers were open and the clothes were all askew inside the drawers. Now, the biggest part of the entire situation when it comes to these clothes is the fact that the shirt and the pair of shorts that Sean had on that day are missing. They were never found. So how do you explain that, law enforcement who thinks it's a self-oof? How do you explain the clothes that have been verified by not only security footage from the middle school of Sean walking down the hallway with a friend, but also when he submitted his homework at 3:09, his school requires a selfie to be taken. And in this selfie, he's wearing the same shirt he wore to school that day that's on the footage. So how do you explain clothes just walking away by themselves? How do you explain that then, cops? I'm waiting. The private investigator told me that the hyoid was not broken. There was no injuries at all. There was no bruises. There was nothing. And Ramona even states that it looked like he was asleep. His eyes were not swollen. The whites of his eyes were not bloodshot as if he had been in any way. There was no physical injuries. And there was definitely no injuries here. The only thing that was actually on his neck was a scratch from a week prior that his autistic little brother had done to him. They said that the little brother's thing is like to grab into that area and had scratched him, had scratched Sean. So other than this 1 week old scratch, there was nothing. There was not even any cuts or anything on his chin area where the rope was. There was nothing. And something that is very important that the PI told me is that Sean's phone was found in Sean's room. Now, Ramona doesn't know from law enforcement precisely where, okay? Because at first I thought maybe he was downstairs making a snack and then got the alert on his phone to take the trash and had the phone with him, right? Like in the kitchen, and that's whenever he started doing the trash. But if the phone was upstairs, then it's a possibility that he was upstairs. Now, PI states he hadn't logged into any of his video games yet that day. So whatever he was doing, he wasn't playing on his video games. But his phone was upstairs. So what if little brother had woken up? And he did get the alert at 3:30 for the trash while he was upstairs, left his phone upstairs when he went downstairs to take the trash, expecting to be right back. But maybe little brother started waking up. And then maybe someone knocked at the door. This is why I believe this is the right direction here. Remember, he was babysitting his 2-year-old little brother. So once like the shock of what was going on hit Ramona, she realized, oh crap, where's my 2-year-old? Okay. They go inside the house and they find the toddler completely covered in clothes. Completely covered in clothes. She pulls him out and he is sweaty and sort of lethargic and his eyes are all swollen from crying real hard, and he doesn't speak. He doesn't say anything. It is said that the toddler started talking about how someone was punching Sean. Now, there were not any bruises or injuries on Sean, but that does not mean that someone did not physically attack him. There are ways for you to subdue people or hurt people without leaving marks. There's also ways you can people by soft things like laundry, like pillows, chokeholds, you know? My biggest thing at this point would be trying to figure out the origin of the self-oofing terminology when it came to this case in the first place, okay? Now, granted, there are a few people that believe it could be self-oofing. I am going to ask the questions to those people and to the law enforcement agency who has this case at the end of this video, because if they can answer me these questions, then sure, I'll maybe bite into your theory. But until then, I don't believe it was. And I don't believe law enforcement knew what they were getting themselves into whenever they mistakenly labeled it as such. Let me explain. News 3 in York County pulled up the documents related to the case's medical files, and it shows that the ER report showed a history of self-oofing ideations. It's crazy trying to say that word, but that's the only safe one I can think of because I hear it on my kids' video game channels, so I figured I'm just going to use that word here. But then the ME report and the autopsy report stated that there was none. And there wasn't. According to his parents, there was never, ever, ever any mental illness or any doctor's appointments relating to mental illness in Sean's entire medical history. On top of that, Ramona made a point to state that there was no way that the emergency room people would have been able to even see the medical history so quickly because all of their files are on the Air Force Base and need special clearance to access. Now, something else that she stated in an interview, and I've listened to so many, I can't remember which one. The emergency room attending that night who declared Sean was the same emergency room doctor who was there a few weeks prior when she had brought one of her younger boys to the emergency room. Sean was not with her on this visit, so this doctor would not have known until seeing her that she was Sean's mother in order to put the two together. You know what I mean? She contacted him and asked him, well, why did you put this on the report? If you didn't access our medical records, how did you put that on the report? And he said, well, I had to have heard it from somewhere, either EMT or law enforcement. There's nothing in the EMT files, so you take away one from two, there's only one answer left. Law enforcement would have had to have been the ones to have suggested the self-oofing situation to the doctors whenever they were in the hospital. Or else why would the attending have written something like that if he had no access to this patient's history? There's no other explanation for it. So then we have to question, how soon into this was it considered self-oofing? Was it right off the bat whenever Maria made the 911 call, and maybe the way that it was worded and then relayed through dispatch to the police officers that came out there, and it was just a misconception based on that? Because on scene, Jared is told by another officer that they do not believe that it was done like that something did not feel right. So it was already being assumed right then and there that that's what this was. It's like they just called it that and refused to move away from it. Closed case, they were done. Well, that's not how this works, people. Now, the PI last night even stated that they don't believe, them and the family, do not believe that the original intent of the law enforcement agency was malicious. They just felt like originally it was just from being not experienced. And Ramona states this in a little video that they have sort of introducing everyone to the case on the Facebook page, that they basically had told them they didn't have experience in dealing with these sort of complicated cases. And that's where the petition on change.org comes from. The family wants the state police or the FBI to take over the case. And there's grounds for that. There's so many unanswered questions. And even whenever law enforcement came out with their video rebuttal, and to be honest, were extremely unprofessional in the way that they presented their own side of this, in my opinion, okay? They didn't answer the questions that everyone who had already heard about this Facebook campaign to put Sean's face out there, they didn't answer none of them. They didn't answer anything. So what was the point in that besides to make yourselves look rude? When it comes to possibility of it being self-oofing, you have to ask yourselves these questions. Was this a sad child? No. He did not seem sad whatsoever. He was excited to be moving to the Pentagon. They had literally just gotten back from a Disney vacation. I believe it was a cruise. They had only been home a few days before the situation happened. And there was a question about bullying. And the only instance that there was ever was in December, a few months prior, where these 3 little girls at school had been teasing him. But that had been like gone and done and resolved and was no longer a problem, and his mental status apparently was not even affected by it the slightest. So if he was happy, they were going on a new adventure, he was excited to be going to the Pentagon, they had just gone on vacation. If he was being bullied, they were moving. He was going to be getting away from his problem. So to self-oof because of bullying when you know you're about to be moving so far away from that problem, that doesn't make any logical sense. And this was a very smart child. But I do have one theory of if it could be self-oofing. And we do have to look at all things here. I don't believe that this has any actual credence. I'm going to say that before I let it fall out of my mouth. This one is very, very, very far down on my totem pole, okay? Could he have tried to do this, and the fact that there was no note but that he was wearing his stepfather's clothes and purposely used something that was his stepfather's, the motorcycle bag and the cord from the other bag, been his note that wasn't left? Could this have been his retaliation for having to be stuck with the stepfather? But then you have to question, this stepfather is also just as adamant as the mother that this was not a self-oof. He is just as willing to have his life pried into for answers as she is. So that's why that one is way down on my totem pole, because that doesn't make sense. You'd basically be asking for whatever you had been putting this child through that would cause him to do this to come to light. I just don't see that being it. Then again, Sean was 5'10", pretty much the size of a grown adult. He had a young looking face, but if someone had gone into the house to maybe rob the place because there were no vehicles present and basically got shocked by the fact that there were people in the house, that could be something else. Do we know if the door was locked whenever Mom and Grandma left? Do we know if Sean made sure that all of the doors were locked? The front door was locked when Maria got home, but that doesn't mean that it was locked before that at all. And not to mention, remember, the toddler was like covered in laundry and like sweaty and had been crying and was like lethargic. The family also mentions that the thermostat had been raised up to like 85 degrees. Why? Why cover up a child and then raise the temperature? To me, it seems like whoever did this to Sean also had some sort of ill intent towards the toddler, right? Is it possible that in the struggle with whoever this was, something happened to Sean's clothes, which are why they're poofed and gone, and because he's so tall, maybe the person went to the master bedroom to get clothes because he figured maybe that's where the clothes for this adult-sized person would be? It could literally be a complete coincidence, or it could be an actual sign of something. That's the problem here. We don't know. Now, one of the theories is that it's military retaliation. Now, these are very high-ranking Air Force people, so anything is possible. But there's also been a lot of questions about where the biological father is on the page itself, and I'm noticing that that question is being left unanswered. So I didn't bother to ask because it seems like that's something that they don't want to discuss right now. I might ask later because it is a very curious question. Speaking of questions, here are the ones that I have for law enforcement. If this was a self-oofing, explain how a belt was tightened so tight around his waist that full-grown men showing up from EMT had trouble removing it. He could not have tightened that belt so tight with just one hand, and it's still been loose enough for him to have wiggled his other arm through in order to fully secure himself. Answer me that question. Also, where are his clothes that he was verified via timestamp at 3:09, turning in his homework, to have been wearing just 20 minutes prior to the last time he was spoken to? Where are the clothes? Previously, with the fingerprints, I stated, I hope y'all match them to Sean's. Did you? If it did, why didn't y'all just tell the parents that? If it didn't, then who does it belong to? And also, law enforcement had his phone, his tablet, all of his electronics. There was no searches about any sort of self-oofing or the F word when it comes to this, okay? None of that was found on anything. This case is tragic. And even if somehow he did do this, someone needs to give us a logical play-by-play explanation on how. And if you can't, then you did not solve this. And it needs to be reopened. The egos need to get pushed aside. They need to reassign the case to people that have more experience in things that are complicated. I signed the petition, and I hope you guys will too. Until next time, see y'all.